I don't think Crawford beats Canelo because I think the weight's just too...
In a shocking change of events, Eddie Hearn recently said that Canelo Alvarez will knock out Terence Crawford very badly at 168 pounds. In his fight with Canelo, Crawford will run, which is what Hearn thinks Crawford is a great runner. At the same time, Bernard Hopkins, a former professional fighter, talked about what he thought about Canelo fighting Crawford. He told Canelo that the fight doesn't matter to him and that there are many other fights to come.
Bernard, just before I let you go, man, about the fights.
What fights?
For Crawford, or excuse me, Canelo. Back to Canelo. Would you rather see him fight Terence Crawford or Benavidez?
We were talking about Terence. Who?
Well, you know, the casual fan, they don't care about weight classes. They just know the names. Crawford, Canelo, they want to see it.
Crawford cares about his life. And with that fight, what do that fight do for Canelo fighting Crawford and Crawford beats Canelo? What do that do for Canelo? I just think that there are so many other fights to make that's realistic.
Bernard was worried that Crawford was putting his own life in danger by going after Canelo since he wasn't built to go up to 168 lb. Hopkins was of the opinion that fighters shouldn't chase other boxers who are out of their weight class if they don't have the height or the frame because they would get beaten badly. Canelo can beat even a cruiserweight because he is an expert in that weight class, but Crawford came up from 130 pounds. Bernard is sure that this is mostly about getting the bag and making as much money as possible, but there are a lot of desperate moves like this coming along these days. Bernard does not think that Canelo will ever be fighting Crawford because this matchup makes no sense at all. However, Hopkins said that Canelo fighting Benavidez makes much more sense because they are evenly matched. David Benavidez is a real threat to Canelo because their fighting styles are a lot alike and their weights are the same. If someone were to hold a large-scale poll and let the fans decide who they would rather see Canelo fight among Benavidez or Crawford, then the answer would be David Benavidez, said Bernard, because that is a fight that is in the same weight class, and Benavidez was in the queue way before Crawford was ever mentioned. Hopkins alarmingly stated that the authorities are trying to busy the fans with silly matchups while diverting them from the fights that make sense. He said these fights aren't as much like boxing matches as they are like UFC and star fights. Canelo has the ability to dominate a cruiserweight, yet we are watching a 140-pounder competing against a 168-pounder. Bernard thinks that these rumors and gossip are ruining the sport of boxing. Furthermore, Hopkins said that he would rather see Boots Andes fight Crawford. He expanded by saying, "I would love to see him fight Boots from Philadelphia. I'm from Philly. Boots deserves that. He earned that. Boots is undefeated, beating everybody day by day. That's a fight. Show me, get past Boots while I get more money fighting Canelo. Then tell the people that you're ready to risk your everything to go up to make $50 million. It makes sense." Bernard gave a brutal warning to stay away from Canelo. He said that he would rather fight a short guy because it makes the fight easy, and Terence is only 5'8" in height. Hopkins thinks that it's not going to be easy for Crawford to fight Canelo, and he would rather see the Benavidez fight. Meanwhile, Terence Crawford and his August 3rd opponent, Israel Madoff, seem to be getting along really well with each other, which is clear from their recent running session. Hearn thinks that he can bring out the best in Crawford because he is a really fun guy to be around, and both Madoff and Crawford are not headbutting each other, so it was a good idea to make them run competitively. Eddie's job is to get the fans engaging and get the voices mentioning the fighters' names. Hearn also thinks that Madoff has a really good chance of beating Crawford, which may end his reputation and his dream to face the Mexican undisputed champion Canelo Alvarez. In an interview held recently, Eddie Hearn explained that Crawford is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters, but skepticism surrounds him as he moves up one weight class too many.
Obviously, Terence has one of the best ring IQs in the sport, but you've said to me previously at the announcement press conference, you never know if maybe it's just one weight too many.
That's what you hope, really, because let's be honest, Terence Crawford's pound for pound number one, or two, or three, whatever way. For me, he's one. And you hope that a guy that won his first world title at lightweight moves to 40, moves to 47, moves to 54, and then all of a sudden...
Hearn thinks that Crawford has changed his weight 4 times, so it may cause trouble for him in the fights. Madoff is a very dangerous adversary that punches really hard. Eddie is skeptical whether Crawford can pull off beating Madoff and then catch Canelo's attention later on. His concern is true because Terence may end up getting hurt really badly against Israel. Moreover, Hearn stated on whether Canelo will be willing to take the Crawford fight. I don't think Canelo is upset about that fight. I think that he kind of feels like, what do I get out of beating a 147 guy or a 154? No one's really going to give me the credit, but look, he'd take any fight. Canelo Alvarez, if the business was right, so I guess he's got his thoughts of how much he should be making in that fight, and if His Excellency can meet that number, he'll take it. If he can't or doesn't want to, that's probably better than he won't make the fight, obviously. In addition, Hearn was asked what he thinks about Edgar Berlanga taking on the Canelo fight, to which he responded that it's a terrible matchup, but it's one that was needed. He said that Berlanga fought Bivol and lost, and he is stepping up from 154 to 168 lbs, which may cause major problems for him in the fight against Canelo. Eddie tried to make sense of the Canelo and Berlanga fight by saying that it only makes sense that Berlanga is the mandatory opponent. Otherwise, there are many connections with the high Mongia-Canelo matchup and the Berlanga-Canelo matchup. Additionally, Hearn thinks that Berlanga is a better option for Canelo because Benavidez is out of the picture. David Benavidez moved up to light heavyweight to face the winner of the upcoming BBV versus Bivol fight. He waited years in 168 so that he could face Canelo, but that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Hearn stunningly claimed that Canelo Alvarez will never ever duck a fight, but certain situations caused him to avoid Benavidez. Alvarez has a number in his mind in terms of how much money he can make with each fight, and he doesn't seem to be getting that with David. Furthermore, David Benavidez is a huge 175-pounder, and he will hydrate to massive numbers. So that is the reason Canelo was asking an absurd amount of money. In addition, Hearn is sure that Edgar Berlanga is a talented fighter since he's undefeated in his weight class, and he punches really hard. Jaime Munguia against Canelo Alvarez was a really good fight, even though Jaime was not ready to face the Mexican monster, but Berlanga and Canelo are even better. Eddie elaborated on his comments on Edgar Berlanga facing Canelo. He said that Berlanga just won a lottery ticket with the amount of money he will be making, and if he gets a good shot at beating Canelo, then it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Eddie further commented that it was a really hard job for him to get PBC to work with them to make the Canelo and Berlanga fight, but it was worth it. Furthermore, Hearn was asked if Terence wins the fight against Madrimov, then does he have a chance of meeting Canelo? Eddie alarmingly stated that he doesn't think Crawford can beat Canelo because the weight is just too much. It's not just that Canelo will be 168. Rather, he will be close to 175 or even 185 in the ring, and he has been at that weight for too long. Crawford's thin stature does not back him going up to 168 right now. Hearn thinks that the Canelo and Crawford fight is more of a fantasy fight because he is not convinced the fight will ever be made. Meanwhile, Terence the Bud Crawford was asked if he is thinking of the Canelo fight, as Turki Al-Sheikh will be calling out to Canelo directly. Terence replied that he is more focused on the fight ahead, which is with Madrimov, rather than thinking about Canelo.
I know His Excellency would like to see what is potentially the biggest fight in boxing. Yourself and Canelo Alvarez. I know you don't ever want to overlook an opponent come Saturday night. Came out last week, back end of last week, saying that he's going to make him an offer, doesn't want to deal with any people in the middle, just go directly to Canelo. You are the fight that he wants to make for Canelo. Is that in the back of your mind? And not so much that you'd overlook, but even more incentive to go and put a performance in on Saturday night, knowing that you could have a historical event with Canelo?
Not really. Not really. Because I'm so focused on the job at hand that I'm not thinking about Canelo. Canelo got to fight.
Additionally, Crawford shared his reviews about the Berlanga and Canelo fight. He was brutally honest in his comments when he said that Canelo will stop Berlanga. He does think that Edgar is a talented fighter and he can be a world champion one day, but now is not his time. Crawford sees Canelo winning easily against Berlanga, as Edgar doesn't even stand a chance. Moreover, when Crawford was asked about his next opponent, Israel Madrimov, and if he sees him as a threat or his hardest opponent yet, Terence was unsure how he views his fight against Madrimov because he has not been in the ring with him, and everything will be revealed on Saturday night. Crawford further said that he thinks Madoff has power and excellent footwork, and he keeps attractive head movements at times. Crawford alarmingly claimed that he is a different type of animal, and he will see who he goes up against when the time comes. Meanwhile, Israel Madoff shared his thoughts on why he thinks he can beat Terence Crawford.
Yes, he want my belt. I want his greatness, because I will be Saturday night, great fight, inshallah.
When Israel was asked about the weaknesses he sees in Crawford's fighting and physique, he replied by saying that Saturday night will show the world his weakness. Additionally, Israel was asked about his thoughts on Turkey, mentioning Crawford and Canelo multiple times before his fight with Crawford. Madoff responded by saying that everyone else has their plans, and I have my plans that will become obvious soon. Israel was then asked if he would be interested in meeting Canelo if he beats Crawford and if Alvarez wins against Berlanga. Madoff answered by saying that first he needs to focus on Terence Crawford, and once he is done with that, he will be going after the biggest fights possible, which includes Kano at 168 lb. In another talk with Eddie Hearn, he distressingly warned Crawford not to go up against Canelo Alvarez at 168 because he will get hurt very badly. Eddie Hearn thinks that Crawford is jumping too many weight classes, which may end up ruining his future for good.
12 rounds scheduled. It will be for both the WBO Interim and WBA Super Welterweight Championships of the World. And it is a final eliminator for the WBC World Championship.
In an interview elsewhere, sports commentator Jim Lampley shared his thoughts on Terence Crawford when he explained that he is a big fan of Bud.
For Israel's up, who do you got for that fight? And how do you think it plays out?
So I was the narrator of Crawford's arrival at the championship level the night that he stepped up on an undercard at the top-ranked CAD here in Las Vegas. They had been looking for an opponent for Bradis Prescott. Fight was supposed to be a stepping stone for Bradis Prescott to begin emerging as a star at 130 pounds. And Terence Crawford dominated every minute of every round. So I've been a big Terence Crawford fan from that moment forward.
Jim noted that he has witnessed Crawford's journey over time, from when he was not very well known to when he turned into a superstar. Lampley further added that Parr is definitely the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. Jim further stated that there have been a lot of talks in the media about the potential Canelo and Crawford fight, which will also be one of the most highly paid fights in the history of boxing. Lampley stated that it's a possibility the fight between Canelo and Crawford may happen because that would be the #1 dollar-for-dollar fight, feeding their families forever. Jim noted on Crawford's fight with Madoff, as that will lead him to Canelo. I understand the desire. I understand the desire to show you that starting tomorrow night at 154 lb, or this weekend at 154 lb, he can fight in a bigger package than a 147, and that he can realistically get to 168 and face off against Canelo, and that would be terrific. Showdown, and I'm sure that Canelo is hoping that Terence will be able to make that journey and come up and fight him totally, in addition to his remarks. Jim mentioned that Crawford will not be able to rock Canelo the same way he did Errol Spence Jr. Canelo has by far the best punch resistance, so it will be a big challenge for Terence. Meanwhile, Terence Crawford's coach, BAC, shared his thoughts on Eddie Hearn when he said that he doesn't like to talk to him because of his bad past experience.
One person that was around at the head-to-head yesterday was Eddie Hearn. I know Terence said, I'm 3-up against you at the moment, against Eddie Hearn. They had that little back and forth. What's your interactions been like with Mr. Hearn over the years?
I don't talk to him much, you know what I'm saying? I asked him while I was in jail over there why he didn't send me no money. He said nobody called him.
What did he say?
He said nobody called him. They picked up the phone and called him.
Later on, BAC was asked if Israel Madoff's promoters actually think they can beat Terence Crawford. BAC shockingly stated that it is more of a promotion tactic than a real prediction, because that is their job to say that Madoff is going to beat Terence Crawford. Back knows deep inside, and he thinks that all the people know it as well. Terence Crawford will beat Israel Madoff. BAC further noted on Israel Madoff's inexperience. For Madoff to just come in with 10 or 11 fights, it's a big deal. You know, he has a big climb ahead of him, and Terence, he's getting better and better with each fight. Think of that because of his IQ. And he learns. He's 40, about to be 401 fights into his career, and he knows the game. He knows how the game works and how to win fights because that's how I look at it. BAC linked Errol Spence's situation to Madrimov moves when he said that Errol and his team were talking a lot before the fight with Crawford, but all their trash talk turned into false claims in the end. Furthermore, Coach Biak was asked if he is thinking about the potential Canelo Alvarez fight in the near future, to which he replied that he is not here to think about gossip. He is more focused on Israel Madoff. BAC thinks that Madoff is a very dangerous dude, and he can give Terence some real trouble, so nothing is solid until the two fighters get into the ring. BAC threw all the talk about the Canelo Alvarez fight out of the window in hopes of being focused on beating Israel. Meanwhile, in another interview, former boxer Shawn Porter was asked to give his thoughts on the Madoff and Crawford fight, to which he worryingly replied that he doesn't like how people just look at numbers of professional fights.
Takes on Israel Madrimov up at 154 pounds. A really, really exciting prospect of what we're going to get in the ring at the BMO on Saturday night.
Yeah. What I don't like about this fight is that people understand numbers. And I don't hate that people understand numbers. However, when you got 40 against 10, it's like, what are we talking about?
Shawn Porter faced Terence Crawford in 2021 and was defeated in the 10th round with a technical knockout. Shawn shared his experience with Crawford when he said that it was the toughest 10 rounds he had ever experienced. He had only watched such combat skills a handful of times when he was an amateur. Shawn Porter was undefeated before the fight with Crawford, but his reputation fell to pieces when Bud stood up to him, and this fight marked the end of Shawn's career in boxing, leading to his retirement. Shawn shockingly warned Crawford of Madrimov's strong power and agility. He said that Terence is taking this fight very seriously because he always has the same face going into the fight, and Madoff can pose a big threat to him when it comes to professional fighting. People often overlook that fighters from different countries have fought way more amateur fights, which puts them in the same situation as a pro boxer. Furthermore, Shawn expressed his desire to face Crawford once again, but he has to remind himself that he is too far gone to come back to boxing. He also said that when the fight weeks come, they force a former boxer to step up once again, but a lot of the things hold a retired fighter back from coming back into the ring. Do you think Canelo is too much of a task for Crawford at 168? Let us know in the comment part below and subscribe for more videos like this.